Hello, everyone, and welcome to a podcast which is yet to be named. Joining me today is that's terrible. Sorry, one more time.
Include this
Hello.
include this in the final.
I'll put it at the end. I'll put this in the end. Great idea. Okay, ready? Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a podcast which is yet to be named. But if you're viewing this on TVSpin, you probably have some idea that this is a TV show podcast. I'm Crystal Fisher, as you may know, and joining me today is good friend Johnny Natrium.
Hello,
Hello.
hello, 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 hello. I can't believe that we're starting off the podcast in this way. We have no name. I've had all of 2 hours sleep last night. This I haven't watched the last episode of the season from what we're gonna talk about, like Peep Show. So yeah, this is gonna be good.
And look at that, it wasn't even a formal introduction to what show we're talking about. So yeah, look at that.
So
We're trying so
improvised,
hard
isn't
to
it?
sound professional, but like if we really wanted to, we'd just be like lazy and shit. We'd be just like, fucking, let's talk about Peep Show. I think that's probably the way the podcast will go because I think that's what people like about our dynamic, I
That's what
suppose.
we like, and that's all that
It's what we
matters.
like, and what we like is best. Not really, but yeah.
It is.
Okay, so I guess what we're going to be discussing today is, well, I guess the idea of the podcast, you'll see more of it on the website, is we're going to be talking about specific TV shows. And let's say if there's new episodes, for example, when like new episodes of Parks and Recreation come out, maybe Johnny and I would do a thing where we actually talk about each individual episode as a
Ah, yeah,
podcast. I mean,
that's actually not.
I like
Yeah,
the idea of that. I don't
yeah.
know if you do, but for
Yeah,
now we're
you can
talking.
tell we haven't even spoken about this
Exactly. Yeah,
before, by
we're
the
just
way.
coming up with it on the spot. But I guess what we could, really do here is what we're going to do, at least for the first few episodes, is just talk about particular TV shows. And the first show is one of our favorites, Peep Show. So, I
Sort of
mean, where can we
introduction to
begin?
everything, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Where do you reckon we begin? Do you reckon I reckon we should begin from like the start of the show and maybe how you got into it. So maybe you should go ahead and tell us your
Jesus,
exciting story of how you
Jesus,
got into Peep
Jesus.
Show.
How did I get into it? I think I saw it like for the first time like back when I still like physically watched TV, like in the room where the TV is, instead of
Yep,
like
yep,
downloading the good shows and looking them up.
yep.
Like I saw
I
like
mean,
the
don't you
first.
mean buying? Don't you mean buying? We're very
What
very
did I
good with.
say? Did I say
Ant-
downloading?
Oh no, I thought you said buying, but yeah, okay,
I think I
cool.
said that. Yeah, I think I said buying. But and I mean some web downloads are available for, buying, right?
Oh yep, iTunes. Yep, that's true. That's true.
But
But
yeah, that was actually back in the day, like when it first came out, and it was all new. This weird camera perspective, this first person thing that was like
yeah,
looking through
yeah,
the eyes of the characters, and it was pretty interesting. And it was in the young days of like laugh trackless shows anyway, so that already made it a bit cookie. But yeah, the camera perspective was definitely a thing that I noticed, and of course the dry humor of David Mitchell.
oh yes,
And
of course.
yeah, I just remember seeing like the first episode or maybe two, and then just never seeing it again, just because it probably had an awkward time slot. It would explain, something about, or maybe not the time slot per se, but the general, I don't know, channel time, yeah, day,
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
Like,
it would never have success on mainstream Australian TV. Put it that way.
yeah, but
Definitely.
at least yeah. I mean, I've heard Mitchell say it himself. Like everybody likes the show, but kind of a similar thing to the beginnings of Arrested Development. Everybody likes it, but nobody's watching it. So
Exactly.
it's always been kind of a niche thing, and that would explain why I never really saw any more of it on TV itself, afterwards. But yeah,
But
that
I
that
think
that's sort of what gave me the idea. Like later when I sort of came up with it again, like Jesus, oh, right, I remember that show. Or and after seeing Mitchell in a panel show or whatever, and just remembering the show and then looking it up. I guess that's sort of how I got back into it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. See, I would say you definitely would have watched it before I did. I think I began watching it last year. This guy, Christian, actually, he got me into it. This dude. he said to me it was a really good show, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll definitely give it a watch. And then I watched it within like a couple months, and watched the entire series. And there's something, yeah, what you said, like it was kind of really, I was taken aback by the way it was shot, but I was also really intrigued by the way it was shot as someone that likes to look at, the it's like the,
Likes to be
like,
likes voyeurism.
yeah, like I yeah. I liked the way it was shot, and it intrigued me how they shot it. And I think I definitely gave it a chance. Like the first episode, I thought it was really good. Do you know what I mean? Like I liked it, but yeah, I
It
thought
sort of
overall
hooks you
really
in pretty easily, yeah.
it does hook you in, and like it is a show that is suited to British TV, and it is on the network E4, I think it is in the UK, which is the same network as like Misfits
I
and
don't.
Skins and all that.
It channel
Um,
it was it started on Channel 4. That's what I know about it. Like
yeah, yeah,
and that was back in 2003. So that's when I saw it for the
2003. Yep.
first time. So would have made me like that would have made me 9 years old or 10 years old or something.
Yeah, oh yeah, yes. Oh, I would have been like 7 or something. So, or yeah, Jesus. But
Giant
it's
time flies.
Jesus. It does fly. I mean, and that's another thing. Like, it's the British format is something that is both good and bad in the fact that there's only 6 episodes a year, pretty much.
Hmm.
So there's been 8 series, and which means what 8 times 6 was that like 48 or something like that.
There's exactly 48 episodes. Yes.
Yes, 48 episodes. There we go. And it's taken them 10
Well
years
done.
to do so. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah.
American
Well,
shows.
I don't
Yeah.
even know. I'm pretty sure that they don't do a series every year. I think they've had like breaks in it as
Oh, they
well.
have had breaks. Yes, they have.
Just
Yep.
like Curb Your Enthusiasm or something. It's something that they pick up again when they sort of feel like it,
Yeah.
or when they see that there's like, when people are when the people are asking for it, and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but I just I like yesterday or something or the day before it, I just in sort of well semi preparation for this. Like we weren't even sure we were going to do this yet, but um, I watched like I started watching the first series again, and yeah, it did immediately like from I just put on the first episode, and it did immediately just after the
Swing you
first
back into it.
yeah just after the first initial impression of Jesus, this does look old compared to what I was used to from like the last series that I'd seen, of course, like the last season of it.
Yeah,
And
end of last year.
yeah. Um, because you could definitely tell that they were still getting used to applying the camera angles, and
Yeah.
in a lot of aspects it looks like an amateuristically done episode, the first one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but the thing is, like, you quickly sort of forget about that, and you sort of get sort of swiped up. It is genuinely like the cliche of it's hard to put it
A
down
pilot.
once you yeah it's hard to put it down after you've sort of after the first 5 minutes or whatever, like you sort of get swept up in it, I guess. And it sort of feels like um the sort of the boiled down version, like the true beginnings of some, where there are just a few like main fleshed out characters that are instead of the growing cast afterwards, but just a few sort of prototypical archetypal beginnings of it, and it's that sort of makes it really concentrated and really focused, I guess, on introducing you to the first, like to the characters of Jez and Mark, and yeah and of course yeah but it does, like, in terms of humor, which I and jokes and writing and everything, which I've noticed more in British shows. The first season is like right on par with anything after it. Like you like a lot of the
That's true.
scenarios, like for the first episodes, you could think of them being like in the later seasons just as well, which for a lot of American shows, it's sort of they have to start things up in the first season.
Yeah,
before it
they do,
really
don't
gets
they?
good or something.
Yep,
The
yep,
same goes.
exactly. Community's a good example of that. First 8 episodes are a different show entirely to what it became. Do you know what I mean? Like, which is like a wacky kind of community
Yeah,
college. And yeah, Peep Show does begin very abruptly in a good way though. Like it's not like it
yeah,
doesn't
like
like it doesn't explain anything, but
yeah,
it does actually define the characters very well from the get-go.
exactly. And right off the bat, you're getting classic episodes like the one where he pisses in the drawer, and
Oh my
the things that come to mind as classic moments of, and
exactly.
the
Yep.
Johnson episode, where he falls in love with his black boss,
He's
and
yeah, he's boss, yep.
who is a man, by the way, and just like episodes and sort of moments where I sort of, Fisher told me like not too long ago, we sort of brought it up, and I could hardly believe that that was the first season actually that he was talking about, because I thought like those are such, the writers were already, or the writer, I don't know exactly, like they usually also just have one team of writers instead of like different writers every episode. But
Yep.
they were already completely sort of developed in their ability to make fully fleshed out classic episodes around these characters instead of,
Exactly.
so you immediately already get these classic moments that feel like they happened somewhere like quite after it got going already, like quite a few seasons in, which is true for a lot of American series, even Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, because Kirby Enthusiasm season one is completely different, but that to the rest of the show, I think. But
Hmm.
it shows that Peep Show over time hasn't degraded much. Do you know what I mean? Like it really, like I mean, first season episode, you've got some absolute classics. I'm just gonna look them up now just to double check. But you do have the Johnson one. But and like it's very weird what kind of gets me into show. But I'm kind of a very referential person.
Hmm.
If you've seen my YouTube stuff, I think you're aware of that.
Definitely.
But I love references and I love kind of like in jokes like that. I mean, that's why I consider Arrested Development the greatest comedy ever made and ever because of those reasons. And I think that for example, like there's something that they said that just felt so characteristically correct. Like okay, it was like this. When Jez, this is the first episode, and Jez thinks that someone's like got like cancer or something like that. Like she
Oh
thinks
yeah.
like he thinks yeah, and she says something. He says something like, Jez says something to her, thinking she has leukemia, and he says like, oh, you're so brave doing what you do,
Hmm.
and she says, yeah, you're right. I never, they thought you can't market acid jazz, to the
Yeah.
public, and I'm just like. Oh my God. Firstly, they know what acid jazz is, so they win. And secondly, it was such a reference that I bet you like the guys in the writers' room would have just been laughing their ass off at how obscure it was. But it felt real, as if she would have said that. And I'm like, okay, these guys know their shit. This is going to be one of those really deep kind of if you get it, you really like it type of shows, and that's what it is. Like the show is kind of a big in joke, I feel.
Yeah,
At least a lot of the inner monologues suggest that.
that's sort of where like our interests sort of tie in, because like to me, like what I particularly enjoy about comedies is the characters, and just the pure characters are the most important thing for me, which is why I like Curb Your Enthusiasm so much, which has like, every character is sort of his or her own, because there is no actual script. I mean, Larry David directs it, and Larry David writes a scenario and gets some bullet points of things that have to be, pointed out or done in scenes. But he always let the characters sort of, the actors come up with their own lines and their own sort of the personality, I guess, which could be a reason why, the first season sort of felt different and prototypical, because the actors still had to get into, who they really were as
Who they
that
were,
character.
yep. But
And
it's funny though how. Oh, you continue then. I got something else to say.
but I was just gonna like relate it to Peep Show in the way that, you know those, you were saying how you know, on one side, you know, your interest is, which is references a lot, and on the other side, how that references completely felt natural and fit in with the character, and that's not only for
It's true.
that particular character, of course, who was just sort of a guest character or whatever with the leukemia thing, but that
Oh
sort of
yeah,
applies
yeah.
to every character, I think. Yeah.
I mean, it's true. You can't references have to have some kind of base, and it is firmly, they firmly put the references within the characters and stuff like that.
Yeah, of
Like,
course. Yeah.
but I
It's
mean,
not
like
like
if you,
yeah, it's not like
it's just
references
there
for
for
the
the sake
sake
of
of
it.
reference,
Yeah.
just like, the infamous Big Bang Theory kind of references.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, there will never be a podcast on that shit, except unless we're insulting it for 80 minutes. But I mean, if I'm looking at season one episodes now, and there really isn't a bad episode. Like you
Yeah.
got episode two, which is full of that famous, when you first see Jeff, Mark's rival, and
The
he's in
monkey.
the elevator, and Jeff starts singing, goes like, "I shouldn't said something
Yeah.
stupid like I like
Then I go
you," or
like,
something
I was
like
like,
that.
oh.
Like,
I actually made a reference to that yesterday in the call with Al, actually.
oh, did you?
Yeah, because
That
I
was
had just seen
gold.
that. Yeah, well,
Oh, like, and then episode three, I'm doing drugs, fuck the police, or something like that, like
yeah, his
that
inner
whole thing.
his just yeah, it always hits the mark. His inner like monologue things or whatever. It always does exactly what it intends to do. It never feels like it's a joke that hits or misses or something like
Yep.
that. Like
And it's always in characteristically Mark as well.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
always his, yeah.
You can't like I don't think there's like a single uh a single line in his inner monologue thing that doesn't make you react the way that the writers wanted you to. That doesn't either make you smile or cringe or whatever. It's usually it makes you laugh, I guess.
Yeah, it does. It is a really good effort on their like they've never really failed with him. And even when Jez says stuff like, I mean, for the people that aren't too aware of Peep Show, I mean, yeah, the whole gimmick of it is that you see from their perspective, you can hear what they're thinking, Mark and Jez,
Yeah.
and their characters. You've got Mark, who is the really sort of pedantic, neurotic. Almost imagine like George Costanza times like 10 million plus, like, like it's not
Yeah, but
like George Costanza, but
he's more of a nerd kind of person, I guess.
oh yeah,
He's
yeah.
sort of
George was never a nerd at all in
yeah,
Seinfeld.
he's sort of a socially awkward. He's a history buff, that kind of stuff. He likes the sort of nerdy stuff, and
Yeah,
yeah, he's really insecure around like even like I think that's in the first episode, which I remembered from the first time I saw it, is how he doesn't. He's pondering to himself why he can't even get out of his own apartment because to get a roll of toilet paper to wipe his ass with because he has to take a shit pretty soon, and um and how he can't even get out of his own apartment because there's a bunch of like kids of like what are they, age 10 or something,
10 or
12.
something like that. Yeah, and
They're
like when he,
outside his apartment playing, and he knows he's already afraid that they're going to harass him because they've done so before. They've like call him whatever pedo or something, and he
yeah,
just he's afraid of that. He sort of avoids like those social things. He's not comfortable in defending himself in those situations, and
no, and it happens. It's a recurring thing in that episode when he goes out and he wants to get like some more wine or whatever, and he
all
sees
right.
the kids, he's like, oh shit, fuck off, just fuck the fuck off, like he goes and gets the kids, that guy to get him the booze for him instead, and everything. Yeah, he is just completely neurotic and socially afraid, and I mean, like, it's just like I'm continuing looking at the episode synopsises and stuff, and like, for example, the episode Local Zero, episode 9, where he gets filmed drinking beer in a park, like in the day. You know that one with Jeff he's like spying on Sophie and Jeff, and like he and Jez get like filmed drinking beer
Is that in
about, and it's
season
like talking
one?
about like season two,
Oh,
episode 3, or who you got, or the episode with Gog, the guy that gets like the musical sponsorship, and Superhands
yeah.
comes in and goes, that's a nice ball of crunchy nut you got there. It would be a shame if it went and like that brings you on to like the recurring characters, because one thing about this show is their very minimal use of other characters. Like there really is you've got Mark, Jez, Sophie,
Yeah,
Jeff,
well,
Superhands.
you've basically got Mark and Jeff, Mark and Jez. I'm sorry. Mark, Jeremy. Like Mark is the neurotic guy, and he's like basically in this, he lives in this apartment. He's got a like boring old desk job, proper English old desk job with like the English kind of office romance, which is basically non-existent, but revolving around like having a shag every now and then in like the office, like with the boss or something. Well, that's not what he's doing, but that sort of office, and
Yeah.
um, and he lives with like an old friend of his, I guess, who is basically a stoner and a sort of a failure in life, and Mark sort of supports him, and uh,
Financially and emotionally, I
yeah,
suppose,
I guess, but
in a way.
emotionally on the other hand as well, and Jeremy, I guess, sort of chips in his more easy social ways, I guess, as well. He sort of like pushes or helps Mark along some kind of the social like obstacles that he's facing at times. Like so sometimes he takes him out to some kind of social event or something where he could meet up with someone, like let's forget about all this stuff and that sort of stuff, so that he has a more easy sort of portal to the social world as well. And they're just good mates, even though you know, they keep disappointing each other. Mostly Jeremy keeps disappointing Mark, but yeah. And
Yeah, it does happen the other way around. I mean, like Jez is probably the worser person, but Mark still does some pretty abysmal things during the show's run.
mhm.
Like they're very similar. As much as they want to think they're different from each other, they are very similar. And Jez, just because on the forefront looks to be more socially accepted and understanding about things,
Yeah,
he still is very
there's
clueless.
definitely there's a lot of people who like there are actually some instances where like you hear Mark thinking like on the inside, when there's a situation going on where he might be more comfortable socially, or he might be knowing the right thing to do in that case, like maybe at a more formal event, for example, where he's sort of more at home. You'll hear him think like, Jesus, what are you doing now, Jeremy? Or like,
Yeah.
how Jeremy is the one who's being awkward at that time and clueless. But just yes, just basically about what you were saying about like the basic characters. There is just Jeremy and Mark in their apartment, and basically their love relationships. And their work relationships. Those are all kind of the secondary characters, but they're always like the main focus of things. Those two chaps, and they've got friends like Jeremy's got Super Hands, who's like this weird, like drug abusing guy who's trying to make his way into the music industry, which you know
With Jez.
yeah, Jess sort of hops along with at times. He's sort of a frenemy in some ways because, you know, to use a douchey word, but because like in the first season as well, I think like Jeremy wanted to work in the recording studio, and he had to start out like just getting teas for everybody, and
Yeah.
Superhands was actually using that to
Yeah, and took Tony.
yeah,
Took Tony away.
basically, sent Jeremy out on an errand and used that to spend time with his girlfriend or sort of dating person at that time, to to sort of get on her, to sort of take her away from him. So that's kind of an arsehole move. That they're sort of pulling that kind of stuff with each other, but
They do have a frenemy, yeah,
yeah.
relationship. Yep, I agree. But they
And
do. He's Super Hands is one of the only characters that isn't actually a bad guy though. Do you know what I mean? Like I was gonna start discussing, and by the way, just to let you all know, if hopefully you're listening still, that this is a spoiler podcast. Like we're gonna go on about plots that happen. Like
oh, fun,
one
yeah.
thing that um I mean, like, what's interesting about the show, I think another thing we could talk about is like the seasonal aspects of it and how when you start going on from season two onwards, there starts to be more of an overt plot happening in the background. Season one are just six standalone episodes. They don't really, I mean, they
Mm,
do evolve. They do evolve
I
with
see what you mean, yeah.
Sophie, Mark's love interest, but they predominantly are just separate ones.
Mm.
Season two introduce like every season they kind of like introduce a new character in a way. Like
And a new
so
thread,
season
so to speak, yeah.
yeah, like a new thread of people. Like so you've got in season two you've got Nancy, which is one of Jez's girlfriends or whatever. And then, to spoil everyone, Mark gets closer to Sophie. Then in season three we see do we see yeah, we see Big Suze. Big Suze is a big part of
She pops up.
season three, and that's one of Jez's ex-girlfriends. And
It's basically revolving much around new love interests and new ways that their old love interests might be interacting with them or even other men who were previously in their lives already. Like how, like,
exactly.
of course, Sophie, who's like, you know, the big love of Mark's life for some unknown reason. I mean, there's no real like she doesn't seem attractive in any way, at least not a
I think that's
personality.
part of Mark's self-hatred, to be honest. Like that, Sophie's a very interesting thing. I think you have some things to say about her, but she is arguably the worst character in the entire series from an actual what
Yeah,
she's done. She is a disgusting human
I mean,
being,
I mean,
actually.
it is ironic in a way because, she's a very like very fleshed out character. Like she's one of the most realistic, and like unpredictable characters
Hmm.
in like comedy history, if you ask me. Like she can do all this. She has all these different sides to her, or at least that she shows. She might just have one side and like show a bunch of different ones to sort of, depending on the way she wants to come across at that time, or happens to come across at that time. But
Yep.
she sort of, so she's very realistic and fleshed out. But on the other hand, she's one of the most, you know superficial, and yeah, one of the most superficial like people you would find in most fiction, who are, not represented as being sort of a bad person per se in the series. She's never really represented as good or bad. She's just represented as someone that Mark, can't help but, strive to
Oh, I would
have.
argue there are times where you see her at her absolute worst. Like in terms of like there's at like there I mean I know what you mean. Like they do try and treat her as a neutral person, but
Well, they
if you're
don't
if you're
treat her
paying
as anything.
attention,
That's the thing. They don't treat her as really good or bad, but they just write stuff that would fit her character, if you know what. And sometimes, like a lot of times, that is sort of, bastardly stuff. But it's not like they're saying to the public, the writers aren't really saying to the public like, she should fuck off, and like what Mark is doing with her is a bad thing. They're not saying that necessarily because Mark never, that never comes forward as sort of a thing. It's never like something that's resolved, and Mark now thinks like, she's, well, he might sometimes think that, she's a bad choice, she's a bad person or whatever, but it always comes back to her. It's sort of a yeah, I don't know. She's not really judged by the writers as a good or a bad person, if you ask me.
unless you've seen
She's not done archetypally.
well, I no, but I was gonna say unless you see um what's it called? unless you see the season 5 DVD extra where you actually see it from you actually see her. It's like called Sophie's Peep Show, where you actually see what she's thinking,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, basically that's pretty much the indicator that she is a bad person. Like, yeah, because obviously we get to hear Mark and Jez's thoughts, so we sympathize with them. And so you think that, oh, on the inside, Sophie, maybe she is just a victim of this shit, and Mark is kind of a terrible boyfriend and has no idea what he's doing.
Well, yeah,
But
you could
it
still you could
turns out that she is the one that orchestrated the entire pregnancy. She's been actively manipulating Mark for such a
Yeah, I
long
guess
time.
that's true. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's just that, on the other hand, that could still be viewed by some people as, you know, it's Mark's own fault for, being such a dweeb and going after her all the time. Then, that she sort of she sort of doesn't know what to do with that herself. Like she's not very interested, but on the other hand, she doesn't always want to disappoint him, maybe, and sort of she wants to, drop him something and give him some sort of satisfaction for the work, and even make him think that maybe he is, having a baby with her or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that was pathetic from her though. The way she did that.
Oh, I
I mean
agree.
she gets and also no, I actually the more I'm thinking about this, I got to rewatch. I think we both should rewatch. The more I'm thinking
Oh,
about it, there's
definitely, yeah.
specific examples. There are times where the writers point out her own stupidity. Like for example, she was gonna get fired more than once. You know what I mean? She's actually not even a good worker
Oh,
either.
yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like she gets and actually she has quite a large descent. Like she ends up being like a drug addict. Do you know what I mean? Like she,
Yeah, but
like
that's the
alcohol.
thing. That's the thing. A lot of people who are going to watch the show, a lot of people from South London, uh, women as well, they are really like that. So they might actually like
Sympathize
identify.
with her.
Well, yeah, or at least identify with her. And I think that it's just a portrayal of what a real person is like at a lot of times. And you never really see whether she's even happy with the way she's acting. But all it is just sort of a situation, a portrayal of something that could very well have happened for real in a person. And the only thing about it is not whether she's good or bad, but she's something that plays a big role in the situation of Mark, and those situations happen to be very funny and very um, entertaining, and that's what the writers are going for entertaining stuff. And I think in that they don't sacrifice the realism of the characters, but rather they or bad. She's all to actually get the entertainment value further, but they never really stoop to any sort of archetypal thing of she's good or bad. She's always sort of realistic, and there are a lot of people who will act like that, even even though they might not be considered bad or good, like generally by other people. They might be pursued by other people. They might be, dealing with their own issues or whatever. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm going off on a tangent here, so. But you know what I mean, right?
yeah. It depends on whether you can empathize with her behavior or
Well,
what
it's not
what sort of
like I
opinions
said.
you have.
I'm not saying I'm never really empathizing with her. I think she's a rotten bitch, but um, I'm not seeing it as that she's written as rotten or good. You know what I mean? She's
Yeah,
written
I
as
know what you
something
mean.
that could happen and that would be funny to happen to Mark. And to complicate some things, I guess.
Yeah, it is done well, but I mean, it probably brings up my only criticism of the show, and that sometimes I feel like it's just too unfair. Do you know what I mean? Like and I know that's the point of the show.
You mean
Like, I
it's
mean,
hard to sympathize with the characters?
no, it just like sometimes it's so cringeworthy. It's kind of a bit. I'm kind of very empathetic, sort of.
Unrealistic?
No, not unrealistic at all. It's probably too realistic in a sense. Probably the only problem I have with it, and it's not a major problem. It's just a minor problem, is that I almost find myself feeling too bad after it happens.
Hmm.
Like I actually start to feel really terrible for I mean, they're bloody not even real people. Yet I start to feel really, really bad for Mark. Like the whole pregnancy thing kind of upset me because I'm like, he doesn't deserve this shit. You know what I mean? Like maybe I'm sexist or something, and I just hate I mean, I just hate Sophie because she's a woman or something. I don't, which I don't. But I'm saying
No.
that people could assume that. But that kind of upset me that he ends up having an actual child. You know, his son. You know what I mean? Is with Sophie, someone that he really doesn't like anymore. She used him, and it kind of like it's so much cringe that it almost upset me. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I'm
but
kind of very
but that's
sympathetic towards the
I
characters.
know what you mean, but I wouldn't see that as a criticism to the way it's written per se, but more as something that you personally, you find, sort of a negative aspect of it. But it's not
Well,
that it's
it's a
because
good thing
they've,
if you think about it because it means that I'm invested in the show.
yeah,
So it's not a
exactly.
criticism
Like,
of the writing by anything. It's more just a criticism of the of the my own plot, which I find like I think it was a good idea, but I'm saying that if I was to put myself in the universe, it's upsetting. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh God, he actually has a child with her, this
but
fucking cow.
do you also think then that some of it might be sort of some aspects of that might be a bit cheap, as in, in the way that they might, write some properly upsetting and dramatic stuff just to cause a reaction from,
Yeah, and see, I think that that's probably where the criticism lies. Is
yeah.
I think that they haven't actually done enough with the child. Like I mean, I think that's
It's, yeah.
probably the point, though, isn't it? I think the point is this kid's gonna grow up in a pretty shitty life. You know, like Mark doesn't give a shit. You know what I mean? Jez obviously
Well,
has no
yeah.
involvement. He doesn't give a shit.
It's the thing. Like, in the end, like I remember, I remember like a little, like quite little details of that. But because I should just rewatch the rest of the whole show again. I only rewatched the first season mostly, even, and the last season I sort of still remember, and I remember seeing the baby pop up again, where Jeff, actually, the Mank,
Jeff, that's
who
it.
who's always been sort of after Sophie as well, but not in an insecure way or something. He's always been hitting it off with Sophie, even though he's a fucking rotten bastard, and she should know that.
But she no, but that and that's another negative point I
Yeah,
make is
I
that
just
about her is that she she doesn't care. She just wants Jeff because he's a confident
yeah, but
guy. The
that
match
is
made in
yeah,
heaven.
that is sort of, on the other hand, it's not a romantic comedy. It's not romantic at all. That's sort of the thing. You're not going to be invested in the way of, you're going to feel bubbly inside about the way their love relationship is developing, or anything. It's I what I'm getting is like a lot of things she does also with Jeff, who's basically an asshole from their work. Like, um, uh, he sort of, he would slag off Mark. He would do stuff behind people's backs. He's he would do stuff to get out of as much work as possible. Fuck people over and all that. And he basically, gets off with Mark's love interest from time to time, or like
Hmm.
whatever. I think it
Depending
turns.
on when she finds it convenient,
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
But that's the thing. It sort of reminds me of people, like some people are like that in real life. And so I don't really feel like there's a romantic thing going on there, but it's more like Mark is dealing with these things, like the way Mark deals um trying to actually make something out of life with what kind of shit he gets handed, like what kind of shit is within his reach, like Sophie, for example, or what kind of shit he happens to be infatuated with. He can't help it, I guess. And it's not, there's not going to be, there is a marriage episode, but it's not, there's not any episodes or scenarios for the sake of trying to get in something romantic. Like there are episodes in other series where, let's take this opportunity to like get some nice romance in, and like develop show how much they love each other or stuff like that. It's basically just stuff that could happen to Mark and the way he deals with his situations. It's basically situations he gets handed and the way he deals with it. And with Jeremy, the same thing. It's not a question of whether it's fair or not, but it's just, they're interesting situations and the way he deals or they deal with them is interesting. And you can never really look at it from a perspective of, it's that it's actually going to be good what's happening to them, or that there's going to be
Yeah,
any
well, it's not meant to be
real,
good, exactly. It's
yeah,
meant to be
there's not
miserable, and
there's not going to be any real
it's a miserable
romance.
show.
Don't watch it.
No, it, yeah, it's very, it's very like kind of nihilistic and just like bleak. But
But
that's what makes it really good.
that's sort of the background. That's sort of the realistic background. The thing that you shouldn't forget is that it's ruddy, bloody funny, like almost all of the time. There's like
Hmm.
genuinely like laugh out loud moments, like strewn about like quite thickly.
Yes,
And
yes,
uh yeah, there's just a lot of and like in the first season, I must say, like what I've watched, I never really got the feeling that much. I never really got that much of a feeling of contempt. There was more like interest in the developments and what was going on and like the characters and just funniness, you know what I mean? Like the just like with the Johnson episode, um it's still like really fucked up what's happening to Mark there, like when you think
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
But to me, it never really got to an annoying stage or whatever. It was mostly funny, him trying to sort of, you know, sort of uh, think about, and to sort of get his feelings into a concrete thing or whatever towards Johnson. Trying to actually watch gay porn and see what he thinks of it, and it's just and his whole like there's the bum. Nothing wrong with a bum. And there's the cock. Okay, this is getting too much for me. And then he just this is
And
getting.
he's not saying it out loud either.
Yeah, yeah.
He's just
These are like his
he's
monologues.
thinking it.
You're seeing like through his eyes while he's watching the porno, and like what he's focusing on, which parts of the video, and like his reactions, like his inner reactions to it, which is
Yeah,
just always funny. Yeah.
it was really well done.
And of
All those
course,
scenes were good.
what of course what we were talking about earlier as well, how the dialogue is sort of um, switched up, or well, not switched up per se, but like um, you get a bit of dialogue like intervaled with some inner thoughts on
Their thoughts.
what's
Yeah,
going on at that moment. So you sort of get them one after the other or something. Like if he's having a conversation with Johnson, like the boss that he's infatuated with, that he's sort of in love with or has a crush on, whatever. It's not never really explained, you know, to which extent those feelings went. Um, but so you sort of see like through his eyes, you see the boss talking to him and saying certain stuff, and all the while Mark might be paying attention to it or not. Like if he's paying attention to it, he might respond, like in real life dialogue, but then he might sort of, expand on that in his inner stuff. You'll hear that, along with it. Or he might just, which is also a good way of sort of looking into how the characters, who the characters really are inside, because you might see like Johnson talking to him, you might see his lips move, and then sort of his speech will go to the background while Mark is sort of thinking his own thing, which might be about what he's saying, or he might be completely disregarding what he's saying, and thinking his own thing. And
yeah,
because of
exactly. Yeah,
the inner thought stuff, you'll completely get all that. Normally that's only sort of explained by the look they might have on their faces, which might say like, they're not listening or whatever. But when Mark is not listening to someone, you might see their lips move, through his eyes, and sort of their dialogue sort of fading to the background while he's thinking his own thing, which really helps in developing the characters as well.
It does. Yeah, that's a good point. You get to see that's the greatest gimmick of the show, and it really wouldn't be anything without the in the thoughts, because I mean it gives you an
Yeah, and
insight that
it's
no
yeah,
other show can give.
it's not a mutually exclusive thing. It's like it has two sides to it. It's just uh completely great for developing the characters and sort of letting you see who they really are. And on the other side, it's also a brilliantly funny gimmick to sort of see
Yeah,
the
it really works.
yeah.
It really works. Yeah, I mean, and using the thoughts in the show, it allows you to see. And what they do is whenever they introduce a new character, so like see or like a new, recurring. So season 5, you've got Dobby, which is it's
Oh, yeah.
still to this day the current Mark love interest.
Hmm.
You've got Dobby, and then season 6 you've got what's her name? You've got Elena, something like that, which is one of the more forgettable ones, but she's still
Yeah, I have no idea who you
ridiculously attractive.
would
But
right now.
I was going to say that's with Mark. Then season 7, you got Zara and Ben, and season 8, you've pretty much got no new people. That was an interesting one. Season 8 kind of just expanded on the previous stuff. But what
Yeah,
I
well,
was saying regarding
you'll see a few like friend groups of course of
yeah, that's what they more. This is more the complete season of Dobby. Like
yeah.
the other seasons, they have Dobby in it, but this one is pretty much completely focused on Dobby's life. And what they managed to do is they seem to manage every character other than Mark and Jez more unlikable than the other ones. Like it's amazing. Like at least this is what me and Angus was saying. Like Dobby's friends are kind of douchebags, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and Dobby herself kind of becomes a bit more of a douche
Hmm.
this season, and it ends with the end of the season is just a huge dick move from on her part. I mean, it's a dick move on Jez's part. I mean, like he's kind of a bit impulsive with his whole "I love Dobby" thing, but I just found Dobby quite bad this
Definitely,
season
yeah.
in a good way where it was entertaining TV, but it
Yeah,
kind of pissed
exactly.
me off.
That
I'm like,
that's the thing.
it
That's the thing. I really had a love hate relationship with that season or something, because like on the other hand, I was sort of, even like Mark and Jeremy was sort of getting a bit unlikable. But on the other hand, it had some classic situational moments, and comedic moments.
yeah, like, punch me in the face. Just
The the
fucking do it.
the
You know,
paintball
like
episode and
the paintball was good, really good. But yeah, it did make him a bit more unlikable, but it still I think it made Dobby even
it's still
more unlikable though.
satisfying. It's
Because
satisfying because of how you don't feel copped out, because it's realistic and still funny. So even though they might be getting less likable, you won't feel like they're compromising something for you, because it's still realistic.
yeah, but I also don't even think they were made that much more unlikable. I more
No,
think
no,
that
it's not that
Dobby
bad.
was made more unlikable. I think Dobby was made borderline unlikable, especially because she was so indecisive about moving in with him. Like what sort of like, and also we don't really understand her other motives. So I think that's what season 9 will expand on. I
Yeah,
hope at least.
one thing that is true is it was sort of hard to get invested in, sympathizing with the characters, of course, because, on one hand, I was thinking like, because Jeremy, he sort of went after Dobby, there, because he sort of started to sort of fall in love with her or anything. But, he is Mark's girlfriend and Mark does love her and everything. But because so you would sort of be rooting for Mark because that, or you could of course be rooting for Jeremy. But like on the other hand, I felt that I was not really rooting for anyone, because I felt that Dobby, she wasn't worth going
Mark.
after. But
Exactly.
she
No, she
wasn't
wasn't.
worth, like, she wasn't worth all this trouble, so you couldn't be like, so you could be saying like, but she's Mark's girlfriend and like he loves her, so Jeremy should leave them alone. But yeah, then what? If Jeremy leaves them alone, then they're gonna like stay together, but they're still
Yeah,
sort of a shit couple. They're still sort of there's no real.
exactly. Like she became kind of like what Mark loved about her was how laid back she was and geeky and stuff like that. And it almost seemed like,
And
I
sort
mean,
of
the
pure and like sort of, she seemed pretty innocent, but like in the later season, like in the last season, she sort of seemed a bit like, even a bit like, she was hiding stuff and a bit back,
I think honestly it's the I think a lot of it
two-faced
is
or something.
a figurative transformation because in particular we kind of saw a similar thing from Sophie. Like season one, we just saw her as that girl that kind of seemed nothing like I think Dobby was introduced like as a way better like person for Mark
Yeah, yeah,
than
definitely.
her. But
Yeah.
still, the point was is they introduced Dobby as someone that was kind of like Sophie, like in a sense, like this new girl. Kind of seems
Yeah,
pretty cool. Mark seems to be
she was
interested.
sort of the new girl that you would be rooting for, like, okay, forget about Sophie, she's definitely better for you, and you can actually have a chance at something better now. You know what I mean? That
Yeah,
was sort of the new thing about it.
that was yeah, and then slowly they like what they did starting from like season three onwards with Sophie is they made her just a bit more kind of a bit more questionable, not particularly unlikable, but questionable. But personally for me, and I think what they expect most of the viewers to feel is that yeah, they made Dobby more unlikable to viewers. You know,
Yeah,
like I think
it's a bit disappointing in the way that real life people can be as well, that they seem like these sort of perfect new additions to your life, but then, I'm not per se speaking from personal experience, but you do see that a lot where, like, you know they truly get to know them, and you start seeing more of these sides from them, or like it's sort of, the other person sort of grows tired of the novelty as well, and starts showing more of their like two-faced ness or whatever, you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
And then it's that sort of makes it disappointing in a realistic way, I guess, to sort of see how she isn't really what she was made out to be at the
Yeah,
beginning.
it's like a huge slap in the face. Um, and I think the way the season ended, I mean, I liked the season, but I
Yeah.
felt like the season ended in a way where it was like, fuck you. Do you know what I mean? Like, hey, look, she's just bailed on you guys,
Hmm.
and there's nothing you can do about it because, they're both idiots or something. And like the way she left was just, I mean, yeah, it was just very, like, I'm pretty sure she's going to New York or something like that. I think that's how it ended.
Yeah,
So.
with her ex-boyfriend actually, right?
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, him. Yeah,
Her
I mean, yeah,
fucking
she's a she's a
ex-boyfriend who
she's
was
a
still,
bitch.
yeah, who was still like constantly, like, even when Mark was with her, of course, he was still in a friend group, but
Oh,
they
yeah,
were
and that reminds
they
me of
were
that
quite
game
far
night.
away.
Do you remember that? The game night. Oh,
Was
that
it?
was hilarious.
Oh, with
And like,
the with where they had to like pick, like, wasn't it like bands or something? You had to
yeah.
guess the
Oh
band.
my God. Well, didn't he keep saying Snow Patrol or something like
Yeah,
that?
something like that. Like before he said it, like you get the awkward inner monologue where,
Oh God, that was so.
before he gets it, like he knows that he's gonna screw up, but he still wants to make a good impression on Dobby, because he notices how, like, her ex-boyfriend is doing really well with her, like, and being funny, and like she sort of seems into him, and he sort of, like the putz he is, he sort of wants to, beat him in that, even though he should be thinking like, what the fuck is she doing with him in the first place? But like,
I think
but
it still it represents his childlike innocence still, and he still just isn't able to understand properly what these sort of cues are and how really
yeah,
um
and
she's
he's
actually
not able to understand very well, like, what what is fair in life or something, or what he deserves. and that's what
Exactly,
sort of
yeah, like
lets
how she
himself get.
keeps throwing him around with the moving in situation. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
if
exactly.
someone was that indecisive in real life, I'd go, okay, she's not interested
Yeah,
because
but
like, it is a monetary investment as well. It's not just a matter of like whether you get along with them.
and
Like
that's
it
you know
has real life
and that's sort
implications.
of the thing which makes it uh, sort of realistic-ish as well, like where you can't, which is something that like sort of explains, not per se excuses, but sort of explains the way that these women are acting as well, because he shows that he's sort of incapable um, of judging the value of something. He shows that he's incapable of he shows that he lets women walk all over him,
He
and
does, and yeah,
that sort of makes the women, the women, they find that out, and that does make you lose a bit of respect for him, of course. It doesn't demand respect when you show that you're going to let those women walk all over you anyway, and so they'll react in sort of a way. They'll sort of they'll sort of you know give him what he lets happen, what he lets them do to them or something.
no,
He,
I think what you're trying to say is that um I can't remember the example in season 5, I mean season 8, but you see when they're aware of him more, they're able to use him to get what they want a lot easier.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
and
seem to be.
when you lose respect for someone, like which when a man, to sort of generalize, when a man shows that he can't demand respect, that he can't be his own person, and that he's only constantly trying to not be himself, but always trying to figure out what he would have to do in order to get that woman or whatever, and in a shameless way, um,
Yep.
without being himself. When he shows that, then it's inevitable that they sort of lose respect for him, and then they'll you know automatically start treating him in a less um, well, human way, I guess, in a less valuing way.
And it's a shame because, but see, yeah, that the way they do is they try and deviate the blame between everyone because what happens is
I
you
guess it's
sympathize
sort of
with.
an instinctual thing as well, from like, I mean, we are just animals, so it might be sort of an evolutionary thing, that's sort of built in a woman's instinct, where when a man shows that he's not his own person, that he can't be his own person, that he lets women walk all over him, and they sort of lose respect for him, then they sort of automatically uh, don't play along with it, but sort of use him instead of keeping respecting him, when they clearly don't really have to add anything new of themselves, to their whatever, their gene pool, maybe even, or their lives. So if he's got nothing to add then in their sort of romantic life, then all that's left for them to do is to sort of use him in a very harsh way to get further in other aspects of life.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it really Mark is a very flawed individual, and I think it comes a lot with his own value, how he values himself, that he just isn't able to stand up for himself in a way that is dignified. He just seems to be very very low on himself, and so that's why. He doesn't want to. He basically lets them walk all over him and doesn't stand up for himself. Like he couldn't even have the guts to fire Sophie. But I mean, you got to contrast that with Jez, who has his own issues. Like we haven't
Yeah.
really discussed Jez
Yeah, we
that
haven't
much, and
discussed him yet.
he is an equally flawed animal, if so, almost more in many ways. I mean, the guy doesn't have a job, and he hasn't had a job for almost his whole life, if you know what I mean. And yet he completely rides on the coattails of of Mark. And it's kind of sad because you kind of want him to succeed, and he always has the potential to, like, but they never pull through. Like something will always happen that will screw it up. Like for example, that whole thing with the bar. I mean the you know what's he call it? You know, they want to like make a him and Superhands want to make a what is it called? Like a club or like a bar, something like that. And you know what does Superhand say? He says something like how about we call it the Swan and Pedo? You know, like just like just they can't, and then like the woman goes insane, and then they never get the rights to the land and shit. Like there's been plenty of times where they've
And
almost made it, and then they never
yeah, and
do.
also shows the side of where Jeremy can be just as bad with letting people walk all over him, and he's just as clueless. Where like the first example that I'm thinking of is how he pretty much almost, I don't think entirely, got into a thing where he basically, he became someone's handyman, like a pretty like this rich-ish artist guy, to get a job. He was his handyman. He got paid quite
Oh
a lot, and
yeah,
it was pretty clear from the get-go that this guy that he was working for, that he was doing the handiwork for, was into him. He was saying, he was having him swim in his bath at first, or in his pool. I'm sorry, not in
it's
his
very
bath.
much like Arrested Development with George Michael and the pedophiles. Do you know what I mean? Like it kind of like the way the hints they
Yeah,
hinted it.
yeah, yeah, sort of, yeah, yeah. They're sort of like he's sort of manipulating him into like, you know, and sort of using him as a not just a handyman, but also because he's attracted to him and he wants, he lets him show skin and like the thing with that is also that it gets sort of a prostitutionary aspect, like it's sort of like how he's whoring himself out because he's getting a big wad of money, a big wad of cash every time, like after he's done with work. But as Mark notices quite quickly, he's basically getting that because he's sort of, his toy boy. And in the end, I think like I'm not sure if he actually ever gave him a hand job, but that was sort of the idea. Like, and like and Jeremy was actually up for that at that time. Just out of his own insecurity, he was actually willing to go along with that. But then
He
the
does go along with it.
but then the musician guy actually goes like, let's not do this because I can clearly see that you're not, you're only doing it for the money and all that. And in a later season, I think, isn't he with? No, it's not Big Suze. It's like this other really dominant woman, and he ends up like in her house. He's doing like the
Oh, you're talking about
cleaning.
Elena. This is season 6, which I consider like this kind of odd season actually. Like I kind of see
It's
it is definitely a
very Jeremy
transitionary season.
focused as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
And his relationship.
Because it's actually interesting because it is when they start to push Dobby more, but it still is kind of taking a back seat to the main Alina and and Mark story. I mean, and Jez storyline, which concludes with Alina end up being like a bisexual and end up marrying Gail, who who Mark ends up working for. That was really good. Well done. I like that. But
Yeah, but
that kind of
like
saddened me
after
too
a
that
while,
she was a
you'll see him like end up like eh, after a while he's like in this situation. I remember that he was like doing the hovering. He was like laying the table. He was doing all this. He was basically He was basically a slave to this woman.
oh yeah, and she
Just
knew and she
yeah,
knew it.
she was definitely she was like being an absolute fucking bitch to him. And she was just, yeah, women are generally like sort of portrayed as sort of, these bitches that abuse men who are showing their weaknesses, I guess.
It is I don't know if it's meant to be a statement, but it is a bit weird how they do that. I mean, probably because it's written from a man's perspective, but I
Well,
think
it
that
might be
like,
women as well. I don't know. It might be
no, it's
for the
written
same,
or
like,
everyone it's written by men. Every single episode is
okay,
written
because
by
yeah, like on the other hand, it might just as well have been a woman's statement of how men should not. men should just be themselves instead of, trying to and letting women walk all over them just, because they can't. They're just trying to be something else just for, those women. You know what I mean?
Yep. That could be. Yeah.
But
It
that's not the case.
They do walk over, and they do treat. I think it's the result. It's the type of people they hang around and everything. I mean, like, it was similar. Even the first girl, what was her name? Um, wasn't it Tony? Tony was just
Yeah.
kind of a manipulative bitch herself.
Yeah, but you
So,
could see like from the get-go that she had her own issues. Like it was quite clear that she was, she seemed a bit like a woman who, but first of all, she went with like she had sex with Jeremy while her ex was like in the house, like he was like right there, and she was screaming and so as much as possible to let him hear, just to try and make him jealous, even though he
hmm
was like a literal line of her was like she was like fucking Jez, and he was like, what the hell is going on? What am I being used for now? And she was like going, this is the best sex I've ever had. And you can hear her ex is actually walking through the house going, yeah, yeah. And he's just getting his stuff like, moving out. Like while he's sort of arranging which stuff he's taking to his place, she's
and
having.
his name's also Tony as well. It's Tony and Tony.
Oh, is that true? I didn't even know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's actually the bastard who then, like earlier, like in the episode maybe before that, I think he like the first episode, I think, yeah, they were at a party at Tony's, I guess, and he's actually the guy who sent Mark out to get more wine.
Yep.
And he actually said, which I found weird, he actually said like, yes, this is my chance to get in on stuff. I'll be the hero who comes home with the booze. Even though it was obvious that, the man Tony was sort of sending him out to do an errand just to get rid of him so that he could, bring home the bacon with Tony the girl.
Yeah.
Which is, when he goes and gets the wine and he can't get in the store because the kids are in front of it and he's afraid of them.
Yeah. That's right. It was I thought it was expertly done in the way that they make everyone so douchebaggy, yet you love the show despite that. It doesn't matter that that's what they're about. It's awesome that they do that. I don't know how to explain it properly, but I think that, like, it's for a
It's just
show with such
witty.
terrible people,
Yeah.
that they make it so good and funny and
Yeah,
likable.
that's the thing. It's one of the funniest shows out there. And
Definitely.
the way everybody speaks, like it grows on you. The way everybody acts grows on you, and you sort of recognize them, and their little mannerisms and the little ways of talking, uh, they crack you up, and you get attached to that. And with Mark in his inner dialogues, he does that in his own neurotic way. And Jeremy does the same, but in his clueless sort of way. And yeah, it's all, yeah, and that's all just really funny, I guess, and still, that's still comfortable. Whenever you hear Mark speak to himself, you'll still, I don't know, it sort of feels familiar and comfortable to hear him talk to himself, and at the same time, just funny how he, reacts to stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I see what you mean. Exactly. Yes, but do you reckon that's it? I reckon that's just about it.
Oh yeah, I reckon I've been like, I'm getting more brain dead by the minute from talking about the same topic for like more than an hour after I've only had 2 hours of sleep. So,
We've done a pretty good job.
oh,
This
I
show
hope.
has had a lot of events. A few more things you could quickly add is, well, you have Sophie and Mark getting married, and that was very interestingly done. And that's one of the first time. That's like the third or fourth time you see um, Sophie just, I mean, like that whole divorce thing. I mean, how she gets the altar and she's like, I don't want this. She was an absolute cockhead.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what did Mark even do to make her say that all of a sudden? You know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, what a bitch. And then you got the whole
That should be the
proposal.
subtitle for the show, just Peep Show. What a bitch.
Yeah,
Just
it really is.
for every woman or situation you can in that show, you could sort of say that.
Yeah, unfortunately, bad statement on women. Don't watch this show if you want to see awesome women, because you
Yeah.
won't. And then, the whole engagement episode where she pretty much just manipulates him into going to different places. Her terrible parents, where I think you can see where all this shit stems from, them just being a bunch of douchebags themselves. Um, yeah, and then what else some good moments? Um, but what did you think of Big Suze? Do you reckon she's likable or unlikable? Because I remember I think she's actually a bit unlikable towards the end, with like how she gets off with
With Johnson, right?
Johnson.
Yeah, which is a nice sort of like, I don't know, sort of a reference to him again. Well, he is pretty recurring, isn't he? Although I sort
Oh
of,
yeah,
yeah, I know him the most from the gay thing at the beginning, but like, but yeah, that is true. But she actually comes across as someone who is not like the other women in the way that she is not very manipulative per se, but she is sort of clueless herself and lets herself be sort of easily led
I
in
think so. Yep.
because like at the beginning she's sort of this innocent girl with Jeremy, and Jeremy actually tries to weirdly whore her out to someone. I remember like, him trying to get her to have sex with someone for money. That is literally what happened in one scene, and she was sort of, she actually sort of, she was like, do you want me to have sex for money? And like at the end, she even cried. So that sort of
Mm.
shows her own sort of innocence and cluelessness, and I think that that might have actually driven her to sort of become, you know, to sort of get in with Johnson, who is himself, he can himself be quite a manipulative man.
He, yeah, he's very Johnson's a really good character actually because they do expand on him way more. I'm gonna go probably tomorrow, maybe watch some more episodes because there's actually some great, like, Johnson actually does hit rock bottom himself.
Yeah.
Um, in season like 5 or something around that, when like JLB goes out of, actually where Mark works, the status quo of the show regularly changes in a way. Like, they still live in the same apartment, but there definitely are some big changes throughout the show, and that's what's good about it. It's not like the Big Bang Theory where like it's basically remained the same for 6 years, except they've added in one new regular character, that annoying Sheldon girlfriend or some shit.
I don't
Like
even know.
they
I
seem
don't
to
even know.
change it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, just for the sake, it's, yeah, they'll write in another character and they'll write another one out just for the sake of short-term, uh well, they'll call it humor. I wouldn't really, but yeah, just for short-term jokes or whatever. And yeah, that's where you'll sort of feel copped out of actual development, of actual depth for the sake of the jokes, which aren't even that good. And in Peep Show, it's sort of the opposite, where there's a lot of realism, and they'll actually use that realism to sort of further the absurdness of some situations, and sort of further the funniness of it as well, and the reactions of particular characters to such situations, you know, which
Indeed.
some people in real life would deal with in their own way.
I think so. And that was the really good thing about it. I mean, yeah, fantastic show, really. Very, very deep.
Yeah,
That, I mean, I myself am getting tired. It's nearly 12.
yeah.
So, I think that was a good podcast. Pretty good first go. I think I think we've pretty much hit the mark in terms of what we're going to do in the future. Maybe we'll refine it in the lab a little bit more.
Yeah,
Maybe try and add some.
I'll probably, well, one thing that's a good thing to go on is better preparation, which shouldn't be that hard because this is like the show that I have watched the least and that I remember the least about. So like most other shows that we'll be talking about, I'll have properly watched. The other thing is that
Yep.
I'll get some more sleep and I'll be able to talk a bit more naturally, I guess, which will be good in the future.
Yes, it will be. Well, I think we clocked in at just over an hour, so that's a good job. I think that's a good job. I expected it to only go for like half an hour, but we can talk our asses off as much as we want.
Yeah,
So,
this is just one show. Normally we're we're sort of getting off on other shows as well, you know.
yep, that's it, exactly. Um, that concludes it. So, do you have any final words about Peep Show?
What a bitch.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining it. It's a bitch of a show, and yeah, well done. Well done, Peep Show. You're
Bitch.
brilliant, and we look forward to season 9 or series 9 coming out this year, hopefully. So I'm very interested to see in the direction it's gone because they have taken a turn. You know, they killed Gerard. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Jesus,
Yeah,
that was
oh
that was
Jesus,
morbid.
yeah, that was morbid, and that answering message that he left, and you know
Oh
that
God.
they were listening to it. Oh Jesus, yeah. So
Actually,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
probably what made him more unlikable because like that was so ugh. Actually,
We could
it was
keep
icky.
talking about this, I guess.
Yeah, it was, but
Yeah, well, that's
definitely.
just the main thing. Like, I'm watching forward to getting some more great laughs out of those characters, but I'm also definitely like you. I'm very interested to see which direction it's going to take, and that's some really good points about it.
I honestly think they'll end the series at season 10. I reckon that's what they'll do. They should
They
do that
might.
because it'd be really a really good number to end it. And it would probably be it'd probably be E4's like most successful series other than like Skins or something. So
Oh,
isn't
that
it? Wait, how
that
can
show
I?
made you feel even worse actually after watching it.
I never seen Skins.
Oh, that honestly, if you felt bad after watching a Peep Show episode, you
Oh
should
no,
not.
my friend just a few days ago started watching Skins, and he said that he like after the first episode, or like the second episode, he was so invested in this one guy. But yeah, I didn't even know anything about it. So, but yeah, apparently that's a good show as
Oh,
well. So
that can definitely depress you, honestly. But yeah, we'll talk about it later, maybe.
yeah, I'll give it a watch. I also want to talk about Misfits,
Oh, we'll
which
talk
is
about it
another
later. There's so
yeah.
many
There's a lot
shows
of shit we
to
can
talk
talk about,
about.
but you're gonna have to watch them. So I'll watch
Definitely
some
not.
shit you want me to watch, and you can do the same, so we can talk about
Yeah, and
more,
we've already
I
got a
suppose.
lot of mutual other stuff that
Yeah,
we
we
know
do. We got
about.
Arrested Development. We got Parks and Recreation. We've got The Office.
Seinfeld,
Um,
even.
Seinfeld. That's a good one. A few others, but
There's a lot, yeah.
yes, that wraps it up. Thank you for all listening or watching, depending on where this is. This could be either be on YouTube or an audio file, anywhere. Who knows? Thank you for listening, and thank you for joining me today, Johnny, on slidespin.tv.
Well, my pleasure, as should be anyone's pleasure to be on Slidespin TV.
Yes, it is. It is an honor to be on Slidespin. Because Slidespin is best spin.
Or to even be browsing Slidespin, you know?
Yes, you're all
You
heroes,
sh
every single
Yeah,
one
exactly.
of you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen.